Typography is a vital aspect of design. Typography is the art of arranging and laying out type. It deals with how the letters and other symbols are formed and how the shapes and interactions of those symbols also conveys a message. I want to start early on with a description of the difference between a font and a typeface. A typeface is the form of the symbols. When this information is stored in a computer file, it's called a font. It's a subtle difference, but this is one of those things that designers take very, very seriously, and they'll argue with you if you do it wrong. The topics that we discuss in this lecture are generally going to apply to both print and screens, and we'll see some of the differences and similarities there as we move forward. The following images are taken from an excellent website that's listed there on the screen called Thinking with Type. It's a companion site to a book called Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton. Fascinating book and definitely worth investigating if you want to learn more about this topic. We've all seen type our entire lives, but not very many of us know the terminology that type designers use to describe the various aspects of type. In this example, we see that type sits on a usually invisible line called the baseline. That's this part right here. The X height is the height of the lowercase letters, and the cap height is the height of the capital letters. The vertical portion of a letter is called the stem, and then these round bits is called the bowl. Some typefaces will employ a tiny little foot like this right here. It's called a serif, and these are meant to sort of smooth the transition between letters. The portion of a letter that falls below the baseline is called the descender, and anything that goes above the X height on the lowercase letter is called the ascender. This example illustrates how various typefaces look very different when even if they're at the same size. This is something to keep in mind when you're selecting a typeface for your designs. As you can see in these bottom two paragraphs, even though they're the same size, there's radical differences in the readability. For the Helvetica one here on the left is much more readable at that size than Mrs. Eve's at the same exact size, and it just has to do with the different way that the letters are formed. So this is something that you want to definitely take into account when you are picking a typeface for your design. Typefaces are organized into families. These contain different forms of the typeface, including bold and italic versions and other designations, as you can see there. When we're dealing with the layout of text, we predominantly talk about the following aspects. First, there's leading. Leading is the space between the lines of type. It refers back to the days when type was laid out by hand, and the spacers between the lines of type were made out of lead bars. I love how something that was, a straightforward description of something several hundred years ago has persisted into the modern world of computers, into a technology that doesn't even resemble that original form. I just find that really, really fascinating that we still use that term. Next, we have tracking, which is the space between characters through a string of letters. And a similar term is called kerning, which is the space between individual letters within a word. And then finally, we have alignment, which is the justification of text. If your text is all butted up to the left, it's called left justified. If it's to the right, it's called right justified. And if it's aligned on a vertical line sort of in the center of the block of text, it's called center justified. And then if you are simply talking about justified text, then this is like a column of text in a magazine or a newspaper where each line is the same width. This article by Christian Bailey goes into much greater depth in these subjects and is the reading assignment for this section. He does an excellent job of bringing these concepts around in very, very plain English, and is a very easy and fascinating read. Now, traditionally, there have been some general rules when dealing with text in print versus on screen. With a computer display, you generally want heavier text for better readability, and you want sans serif or typefaces that don't have serifs, because then you don't get the letters all mushed together, because the size of the pixels on a traditional screen are big enough that the serifs kind of have a tendency to blob the letters together and make it not quite as readable as a sans serif font. And then finally, if you have a fixed width font, all the letters are going to be the same width, and so that's what you would use for columns of data or other formatted text. If you've got regular prose, then you probably want to use a variable width font, because it makes the words fit together a little bit better. Now, in contrast, in print, we generally want to do kind of the opposite. We want lighter text to make it more readable, so there's more of the paper coming through and less ink. And you also generally would prefer a serif font, because, again, the lighter text, the serifs kind of help to make the text flow a little bit better. All that said, with modern displays, the old rules really don't apply as much anymore. With things like retina displays and higher definition screens on mobile devices, and the increasing popularity of 4K displays on desktops and soon laptops, this trend is only going to accelerate. I would say within 5 to 10 years, this section of this lecture will be completely obsolete, and there's really not going to be any difference between how you work with type on screen versus print. Ultimately, the only rule that it comes down to this: use the typeface that works best for your design. You're the designer; you figure it out. We have a few tools here for working with type. The first one's called DaFont, and it's a collection of freely available typefaces, font files that you can download. The next one is Type Tester, and I really like this tool. This is a cool one. You can take text that you're going to put into your design, and it allows you to see what that text is going to look like with different fonts and different variants of those fonts. And you can compare them right there on screen in different columns. It's a really, really great tool. And then obviously, bet you didn't see this one coming, Photoshop. That's always going to be on pretty much every list of tools that we have. The last bit here is kind of a fun game. It's called the Kern Me game, and you go to the link there on screen. Again, as always, all these are in e-learning. And I want you to play the game for a little bit and look for concepts that we discussed in this lecture. This game kind of lets you see how good you are at kerning text by hand, and gives you an appreciation for all these subtle little movements that make text actually just right. So play that game. It's a lot of fun. And that's it.